I'm just staying here with you. Take it to the good times, see it through the bad times, whatever. Okay. Good afternoon, good morning, and good day, depending on where you're at in the U.S. I want to welcome you to today's Growth Track conversation, and thank you for spending time with us. We've got a chat window going. Would you mind just saying hi? I recognize some of the names from Tuesday and maybe even before, but just say hi. Let me know where you're from, where you're dialing in from, or where you are at, and if this is your first time with Growth Track or not. I'd really appreciate that. If this is your first time, I just want to do a quick intro of what it is. Basically, how did we come about? Why is Growth Track happening? Who are we? My name is Doug Pedersen. I'm the CEO of Careers in Nonprofits and your facilitator here with Growth Track. And so basically for years, we've been surveying our candidates that we've placed at various nonprofits around the country. And for many years, people have been asking for more career development, professional training, and advice on how they can manage their search and then really their career. And so we wanted to do it a little bit differently. We took our time with it, and instead of just talking about resumes and interviews, formatting, preferences, and things like that, which are very important, what we noticed is there's some significant challenges in the workforce today, and we wanted to address those things from a development standpoint, from a personal development standpoint. And so that's what Growth Track really is. It's personal development for your professional growth. We've picked 4 topics that we think move the needle for just about anybody, depending on no matter where you're at in your job search or in your career, whether you're currently looking or you're managing a staff and just looking for advice on and things and tips and techniques to do that better. We have that there. So I see a few people weighing in. There's Lauren from San Francisco. Hey, Lauren, good morning to you. In California, I see Helene from Chicago. Hello, Helene. Hopefully you enjoyed the 80s music. I put that on today because I know it's almost festival season in Chicago, and even though I don't live there now, I know that those festivals are about to kick off. So thanks for weighing in. Okay, and this is your second webinar. Okay, fantastic. So, excuse me. So today we're talking about coherent leadership, and I first just want to acknowledge you guys. If you're on this call today, participating in something called Growth Track and something with a title called Coherent Leadership, it's because you care. You're interested in your own development. You're looking for, new techniques or just something different that you can add to your tool belt. And that's our goal today. There's a lot of conversations about leadership. We think we want to take a little bit different approach with it and really introduce to you the concept of relational energetics and get that information to you. So there's going to be a little bit of a Relational Energetics 101 today. That's what we're going to close with. But in about 10 slides, that's what we want to do, is inspire you to look beyond the typical techniques for team building and even just self-leadership and see what a strategy of appreciation or admiration for yourself and others can do for performance and for team performance. Okay, so that's what we want to do. I'm going to unpack that a little bit here in the next 10 slides or so and give you, the supporting facts that will show you that. Okay, so if you would, I see there's Barb. Hey, Barb, good to see you again. Barb and I have been emailing back and forth, and she did the DISC assessment that we gave away, or the link that we provided on Tuesday. So if you want to share your experience with that, Barb, that would be great. If you guys wouldn't also mind, because we're talking about leadership, I'd like to know where you're at with leadership, and not like in a survey way, but let me know. Do you have direct reports now? Have you had direct reports in the past? Are you an emerging leader, if that's even a term? I'd love to know where you're at and what, just so I can guide the conversation. Okay, so let's kick this thing off here. All right, next slide. Slide stuck, there it is. Okay, so why are we talking about coherent leadership or just leadership in general? What is it? And so I shared some of these statistics last Tuesday, but basically, here's one of the biggest reasons why. Is because 58% of people in the workforce trust strangers more than their boss. And I laugh at that because, I'm looking at my staff and wondering which half of them don't trust me. I'm just kidding. But I mean, it's a true thing. I mean, when you get together socially, and you guys know this, I mean, a lot of people have issues in the workplace, and there's a lot of conflict, and this is a real statistic. People don't feel appreciated, and a lot of it has to do with the people that they work for, their supervisors and their bosses. We see that as a leadership challenge, but also a leadership opportunity. All right, here's another one. 53% of Americans are unhappy at work. That's from the Conference Board. 79% of people who quit cite lack of appreciation, okay, for their reason for leaving. So they just feel unacknowledged. That's a really big number. 8 out of 10 people, 8 out of 10 people who quit, that's the reason why. It's simple recognition. All right. And then this one I shared, this statistic I've been following for as long as we've been doing nonprofit staffing, and it hasn't changed much. And it's from Gallup, and it says 70% of employees, hate their job, and they use the term satisfaction or dissatisfaction. And when you break it down, 62% of people who are in the workplace, are basically sleepwalking, right? They're actively, or they're just disengaged, working from 9 to 5. Where 23% are actively disengaged, which means they're looking to act out or undermine their department, their coworkers, and they're just not, in a good spot. And so this is why we're talking about it, because these are real statistics. We run into this in recruiting a lot, on both sides of the table. When candidates report their previous experiences, and clients also report, the hiring managers also report what's going on. And so again, we see this as a leadership challenge, a significant leadership challenge. But for those that are progressive in their thinking and their application of this, this really is a great leadership opportunity. It's a great opportunity to step in and show something different, and show people something different, and take charge in a way that will rally people towards a common goal and raise impact and raise contribution. So it's a very good leadership opportunity. Okay, a couple people weighed in. Great. We've got some stuff. All right, awesome. Thanks, guys. I want to keep us rolling here. And so what are some of the big thinkers out there saying about leadership? You guys familiar with Simon Sinek? He has a couple of books out, or a bunch of content, and he's the Find Your Why. He's the why guy. And I had a chance to see him at a conference a few years ago, and he gave away this book, Leaders Eat Last. And so here's what he says. He says, leadership is about taking responsibility for lives and not numbers. Managers look after our results, and leaders look after us. So in this book, he's really, spending a lot of time saying how people are more concerned, managers, the bosses. One of the reasons why that statistic is so high, 58% of people trust strangers more than their boss, is because the boss is more concerned about managing up. That boss is playing politics maybe, or managing to a data set or a certain financial goal or something like that, and not really taking into the people side of their role. They're not interested in necessarily their staff's well-being, their professional development, and so forth. There's the bedside manner that's missing. All right. Here's what he also says in the book. He says, feeling a shared common burden is one of the things that brings us together. And I think we all know that. If you've ever played sports, or been on a high-performing team, or just your friends, what brings you together is some kind of common bond, not necessarily a struggle, but a group goal, something that you feel deeply and passionately about, that brings you together, your skills, your experiences, to come together and really make something better. And it's that shared burden. That's what really draws us together. All right, here's another guy. Have you heard of John Maxwell? Some of you might have. I don't know if he's the most prolific writer on leadership, but he definitely has. He's one of the guys that has the most books on leadership in the modern era out there. And here's his latest one, or one that he did a couple of years ago. It's called Invaluable Laws of Growth. He says, the measure of success is not the number of people who work for you, but in the number of people you serve, right? So same kind of idea. It's not about you, it's about the people. And I really liked what he says here, because it's just different. It's a nice way of thinking about it. He says, be a river, not a reservoir, all right? Most people are like reservoirs that continually take in water, but only to fill themselves up. In contrast, a river flows. Whatever water it receives, it gives away, all right? So, that's a nice poetic way of looking at it, but it basically says that the leader's job is to give away the praise, give away the responsibility, give away the recognition, give away, the responsibility and really empower their people, to be a conduit of all those things and not a hoarder of all those things, right? The river flows, the reservoir, holds, and so that's what he's saying is a big difference in leadership, maybe how versus management, how Simon would say it. All right. Last big thinker out there that I like to follow is Dave Ramsey. Have you guys heard of Dave Ramsey? You know Dave. He's got a lot of stuff out there. He's a syndicated broadcaster, financial guru, and all that stuff. And he's got a conference that he's been doing now for a long time called Coherent Leadership. And in his book, he talks about, do you know why most employees aren't loyal? And this goes to some of those statistics that we just looked at. He says, because their company and leadership aren't loyal to them, And he goes on to say that unity can be created only when the team cares for each other. And out of all the quotes and out of all the books that you could read or things, I think that it's this one here that's worth spending time on, is that when a team cares for each other, almost anything can be reconciled, resolved, surmounted. Great performance comes when people come together and put their talents and skills, their energy towards a common goal, which usually is good, right? That's when magic happens. And so I want to explore that a little bit and just take a look at unity and maybe about care for one another and how that can be cultivated, all right? So, how do we inspire care for one another? I don't know if this is a fair picture to put up, but if, the workplace feels like this, or if you see stuff like this, again, definitely a leadership opportunity and a leadership challenge all at the same time. If you've got an example about how you've inspired any of this stuff in your teams or anything that you've seen that's worked, just hit us on chat. I'd love to interact with you and see if you have ideas or if you've seen something that worked as we go on here, all right? So let's look at this. Dave's talking about creating unity. And so how do you do that? And, I think that this is not a generic list, but you can find this stuff, out there. And this is just from another chapter of his book, but I think these are the best practices. These are the common best practices, at least the first 5 are. And so, and we've seen it. We've definitely seen it, over the last 10 years plus, as nonprofits have worked. Many have worked to improve communication, not just to the community that they serve or the industry that they serve, but to their employees and to their donors. And we've seen a big push towards transparency, and in some cases, a leveling of the hierarchy, within organizations, making a more flat management org chart, if you will, or management style versus the siloed, chain of command hierarchy. We've seen that, and improved communication is a way of bringing people on board, and helping them share in the common vision and goals. And that's number 2. So, if you have a vision and goals but you're not communicating them, it's very hard to share them. And so I think these are very linked. But you guys know this, especially if you've been in the sector for more than 5 minutes. Every nonprofit, whether they're an association or a social service or a foundation, a school, they have very clear missions and goals and causes, that they're about, and that draws people, to work for them that share those things, that want to help in those ways, and that want to serve in some capacity. And so, the goals or the cause, the vision is usually there. Sometimes what's lacking is the communication or in understanding that employee or that person's impact towards the mission, and that's where communication can come in. But that's one thing that really can create unity, and get past a lot of the clutter is when people are sharing those vision and goals. The last 3, number 3, 4, and 5, wipe out gossip, resolve old conflicts, and stamp out incompetence. These are really cultural characteristics or characteristics of the organization or the department's culture, the leader's culture. And so, I think I've seen this in my career in certain places where gossip was okay, or gossip was the way it was, and a lot of it stemmed from the top. You didn't know who was really, and this is I'm talking about, in large companies. I've worked for, some Fortune 5 and, within the Fortune 10 companies, and nothing wrong there, but just, they're big, and you can find, pockets and fiefdoms, where gossip, and you really don't know who's in charge or what's happening or what's going to, be the next strategy or course of action within these big companies that are constantly changing. Conflicts, I shared a statistic last Tuesday about how the average employee or person in the workforce today experiences at least 3 hours or almost 3 hours of conflict. So some experience less and some experience more, but resolving old conflicts, if they're not resolved, it's hard to have unity on a team, And then if incompetence is allowed on the staff, especially as the generational shifts are happening within the workforce, people aren't going to stay. The high performers aren't going to stay if incompetence is allowed. Okay, so these are some of the best practices out there. Number 6 is the one that isn't really talked about. It's not talked about as a leadership tactic or technique or best practice, but I want to go there today and spend the rest of our time here, maybe 10, 15 minutes, and introduce to you relational energetics and show you how you can leverage it, not just in yourself, but within your team, right? Whether you're the formal leader or the person who's setting the example for everybody, this is really powerful stuff. It's easy, so I don't want you to overlook it, but it's different, okay? It's different than all the first 5 things here, okay? So I'm looking over here at the chat. It looks like we've got some good sharing going on. All right, so that's good. That's good. All right, keep the conversation going, guys. All right, has anybody heard about relational energetics or heard about HeartMath, the organization called HeartMath at all? And I'm going to pause for a second. If you have, chat me. I'd like to know if anybody has experience here. Barb is on the call, and they're located close to you, Barb. So HeartMath is in Bear Creek, California. I had a chance to go and get certified in their program about 5 years ago, and what we're going to be talking about now, it will be coming from them. It's their content. So you're going to see their logo on some of these slides. I just did some screen shares, and I want to introduce it to you. Okay. So, but basically, HeartMath, let me introduce them, is an organization. They also run a nonprofit. It's made up of like doctors, scientists, researchers, PhDs, those types of folks, and they've been studying the performance of the heart for I think 25 years, or almost 30 years, somewhere between 20 and 30 years, formally, in labs, and they've published a lot of in journals and books and training programs and stuff like that. And so this is where the content is coming from. All right. All right. So what is relational energetics? Let's examine it a little bit. All right. So don't freak out, because we're going to get a little scientific here and look at some charts. But as I'm talking to this slide, I want you just to imagine, what's really going on here and where this data is coming from. It's a couple of researchers in a lab with, I believe it was a woman who had volunteered for the study, and they're basically just have her hooked up to a heart rate monitor, and they were going to examine or observe how a couple different emotions impact the heart rhythms. So we've got two different time periods. The top was one instance, that's in red, and then the second chart on the bottom is in blue, that was another instance. And I just want to show you the contrast between the two. So this is a real study. They're in the lab, okay? So let's look at the one on top, all right? A lot of times when I'm teaching the full block, this comes from a day-and-a-half training program, but when I'm teaching this whole thing, you just say, well, what do you think the woman was asked to do to establish the pattern on top? What is that? And the answer is, the researchers basically just looked at the woman and said, please feel frustrated. Please feel frustrated. And then everybody got quiet and they monitored her heart rhythms. And the pattern, as the seconds ticked, here from 1 to 200, it produced this heart rhythm pattern that kind of looks like the volatility of the Dow Jones, right, or the stock market. It's up and down, and there's no really rhyme or reason to it. And basically, the scientists describe this as an incoherent heart rhythm. And it basically indicates that all of her major functions, within her body, in the body, digestion, respiration, hormonal release, stress responses, all those things are not aligned. And this can, as it says here, impairs performance. It amplifies energy drain. Basically, when we're frustrated, sometimes it's hard to see clearly. And if we get frustrated long enough, we could be angry. Sometimes we just don't acknowledge every detail, right? Or that emotion can really take hold of us, all right? But this heart rhythm pattern indicated all that stuff that was going on with her, okay? So a few minutes go by, and then they say, okay, Miss Subject, now please feel appreciation. And they waited, and what was produced in the study was this diagram here in blue on the bottom. And as you can see, it's very different. Okay, it kind of looks like one of these rhythmic sine waves. Was that in geometry or trigonometry? Don't quote me on that. But one of the, it's got predictability, right? So it rises and falls within a certain range, and each heartbeat rhythm is within a certain variance from each other, equal distance. And the scientists would describe this as a coherent heart rhythm, and it's basically just the opposite. This indicates that all the body's major functions are aligned. It's optimal performance. This is when we're thinking clearly, we're listening clearly, we can communicate clearly, we're observing, and we're kind of in flow. We're receiving at the highest level, and therefore we're able to perform at the highest level. Okay, and so basically that's what they're talking about here, and is the difference between incoherence and coherence. Okay, now we're going to see how this applies, these two different states, what happens when we're in an incoherent state versus a coherent state within ourselves, and then also when we're around our coworkers or our team, or when we're managing our teams. Okay, so let's build on this a little bit. All right, so here's how it works. And so basically what they discovered, as you can see here, we've got the red line again on the left and the blue line on the right, and we can read the slide, and it says heart rhythms directly affect physical and mental performance. And what I like to think of is, if you just, on the top here, I'm reading, it says heart rhythms directly affect, we really need to understand that our emotional state, right? What happened with the woman? They said, feel frustrated, then feel appreciation. So those emotions directly impacted her heart rhythm patterns, which impacted everything else within, all the way up, to brain signals and cognitive functioning. And that's what this is saying here, is that heart signals affect the brain centers involved in decision-making, reaction times, social awareness, and the ability to self-regulate. All things that are necessary when we're dealing with other people, right? Dealing with our staff, especially if, we're the leader and half of our people might not trust us, right? Or if there's conflict within our team and we need to be the moderator or figure out how to resolve those conflicts. Or if the strategy or the goals change within the department or within the organization, you need to communicate it well. It'd be very handy to be, in your best state, in a very coherent state, to make sure that those communications are received the right way and not miscommunicated. Okay, so this is just a diagram of how it works. Again, basically, if I think about it in a 1, 2, 3 step process, it's like emotions that we control, that we can choose, affect heart rhythms, which then affects all these major systems within our body, which produce either an incoherent state or a coherent state, right? We can perform at our best or maybe not at our best. And that's all that we're saying here, okay? Here's where it gets really interesting and where we start getting into the relational energetics piece of it, is that what the researchers also found is that every time the heart beats, there's a magnetic field that is produced, okay? So that's what this slide is showing. And I found this to be really interesting, all right? And I was very excited when I saw this. So let's read it together. It says, our thoughts and emotions affect the heart's magnetic field, which energetically affects those in our environment, whether we are conscious of it or not, okay? So this is really a powerful thing to understand and realize that it's happening all the time, okay? And so it's very important, though, that we establish that we're not talking about an aura or anything else. The electrical field that they're referring to it's more similar to what your cell phone emits, or what radio signals, radio waves are transmitted on. It's just anytime there's that motion, the heartbeat's motion, there's an electrical field that can be measured, just like the brain waves. If anybody's ever seen that, a lot of people think about brain waves or what's happening there and the electricity of the brain. Well, it turns out that through study and analysis and with technology, the researchers have found that the magnetic field that the brain produces only emits about an inch from your head, but the heart's magnetic field emits 3 feet. okay? And it's 3 feet because that's as far as the instruments can see. You know, technology is only sensitive enough to see, you know, up to 3 feet away. They don't really know how far it goes. But it's very, very interesting because what happens is our emotional state, right, that coherence or incoherence that we're feeling is being broadcast over this magnetic field. And so we're basically, you know, either receiving or broadcasting our emotional state constantly. And, you know, I don't have another chart to show you, but there are charts that show how scientists, you know, can predict a person's emotional state within 75% accuracy just by looking at the chart. You know, our emotions have digital fingerprints, right? Frustration looks differently than appreciation, not just in the heart rhythm pattern, but in the electrical signal that's being emitted from the person, okay? And so we are carrier waves of information, and we're constantly, you know, broadcasting and receiving whether we're aware of it or not, okay? So very, very powerful facts to know. And this is why it explains, I mean, you know, again, if you're on this call, you're probably interested in your growth and how you relate to yourself and others. But this is one of the reasons that explains why there can be tension in the air. You know, have you ever, you know, had a coworker where you just knew they were having a rough patch, whether it was in the workplace or not, and you could just feel it. You know, they were visibly upset, but you could also, you know, feel how upset they were. Or, you know, if you walked into someone's office and there's just heavy tension and they're not visibly upset, but you just feel the weight of something. You just tell that there's something going on with them, right? This is what it is, that we're constantly broadcasting and receiving these emotional states. And the other side of it is true. It also explains why some people, they're just light, you know, light to be around, and you know, it just seems like, you know, it's the opposite. You know, there's not that tension. There's actually, they're fun to be around, you know, and they're happy or joyful. You know, this explains why that is. Okay, so let's see how this relates to people. Here's where it gets, you know, really valuable. I think not more valuable, but when you start thinking about people and your team or your coworkers, okay, and what this stuff does, relational energetics does when we get around each other. Okay, so this is just a diagram of another study, and what the folks at HeartMath did is they got 10 groups of 4 people, and they took 3 of the 4 and trained them in their resilience building practices. You know, HeartMath has like 5 techniques, I believe, to help people get into that coherent state, right? They teach you how to, you know, impact your heart rhythms and get to that coherent state. So they took 3 people, gave them the training, and then they gave them directions on when to shift in and out of coherence together. So they were coordinated. And then they put 4 people back together. And basically over the course of the day, you know, the 3 people out speaking, they had the same time schedules. They shifted in and out of coherence. And the 4th person had no idea what was going on. And this chart just shows you what happened when they analyzed all the groups after the end of the day. Person 4, all the groups became more coherent as the 3 proactive to a coherent state. So the 4th became more balanced, more coherent. Okay. So I hope this is clear to you guys, and you're starting to see the impact, but also the benefit, right? If we're to be our best selves and be the best leaders that we can be, you know, coming to our teams and coming to our profession or whatever it is that we're doing, even our job search in a coherent state is very important. But also very to the people that you're dealing with, right? The people on your team. You know, your coherence can be the best way to help someone else come back into balance, right? And that's what this study is really showing. And I think it's fair is once you really get a hold of this knowledge and practice it a little bit, it's you know, ask yourself continuously, what am I feeding the field? What am I feeding my magnetic field? And what is that person receiving from me? And collectively, if we are establishing care for each other, maybe we can move the needle on some of these statistics or some of this conflict or some of the dissatisfaction that we have just in our local department, you know, in our team of 2 or our team of 5 or whatever the case is. All right. So very, very powerful stuff. to summarize it, here's the benefits of it. And again, and just to summarize, the point here is that our emotions and attitudes affect people positively or negatively, whether we know it or not. When we're centered in sync, we create that coherent field environment we were talking about. And cultivating appreciation fosters coherence in a harmonious relationships, happier, healthier, more productive work environment. And so again, the question is for yourself, what am I feeding? How can I to my position? But also, what can you do to cultivate a culture, moments of appreciation, admiration? From the thought leader that shared goals, unity, that it comes from when people care for each other. And this is a way, high level, to establish that, and to get that level, not just the superficial, beyond just the goals of the organization. This really is the deepest you can go when aspiration is really feeling it, and really putting it out there. Okay. So that's the introduction to it. We're gonna wrap up here and get to questions. If you have any, I'm gonna keep the chat line open. But some of you have to be asking, well, what is it that the three people did to get into coherence? And what is it, what is that really all about? And so this is for you overachievers that want to know. Basically, there's this thing called the quick coherence technique. I mentioned that there's 5 or so techniques that they have. This is one of them. And it's very simple. It's a breathing exercise. It's a breathing exercise that's matched with, a positive emotion, kind of like what in that first study that we talked about. First step is, I have it on the slide, it's just focusing your attention in the area of the heart and taking deep rhythmic breaths for a certain period of time. What that's doing, the scientists found, is it's eliciting biofeedback, and it's starting to create the alignment physically for your hormonal system, your digestive system, those things that we talked about in your nervous system that start to help to create coherence. I kind of like to think of it as pushing the clutch in. If you've ever driven a stick shift and you need to shift gears, this is that. Heart-focused breathing is pushing the clutch in. If you need to change your emotional state, starting with heart-focused breathing is pushing the clutch in. The second step is basically just matching that, or making a sincere attempt to experience the regenerative feeling, right, such as appreciation or care. And a lot of times you can do that with a memory that you have. I'm married, so my wedding day was, I have vivid memories of that, or my kids being born, or small things. I like espresso, and so, that ritual of smelling the coffee and making it in the mornings when it's just my quiet time. I've done quick coherence with that, and and just get that positive feeling. But once you start applying that to your team and getting those same emotional, fingerprints emitting through you, that's where it really becomes valuable from a leadership standpoint, and where team coherence, team care, team performance be improved, or turned around if it needs to be. All right. So that's what they did. You can go online and find out. There's YouTube videos that HeartMath has about quick coherence and so forth. So, all right. So that's it. I want to end here and then just see if there's any questions. If you have any questions, go ahead and chat them to me. I hope this was helpful. And I'm going to close the video down in a minute, but we've got plenty of time. We scheduled till 1:30 Eastern. But if you have more questions, I'll be on chat. We can chat there, or if you want to speak about anything, we've got time, and I'll be happy to unmute you and have a conversation if you think it'd be you or to the rest of the group. All right. So with that, I want to thank you guys for your attention. For those of you that have been with us for the previous talks and growth track, I want to thank you again. It's great to see you online. And if you haven't already done that, we've got one more talk happening this month. It's called Career Mapping. I really encourage you, if you're not already registered for that one, go ahead and go online, register for it. It's going to be Tuesday the 23rd. We're basically skipping next week because of spring break. I've got small kids, and so they're going to be around, and we're going to take off for a little bit. But Tuesday at 12:30 Eastern, it's career mapping. I'm going to have Nurse Harrigan on video with us. We're going to interview her about her book, Make Your Mark. Okay, it's a nonprofit professional's guide to career mapping success, and we're going to be giving these away for free to everybody that attends. So we're going to just not talk to her about the book, but what's in it, She's a pioneer of career mapping, and she's been working on this stuff for a long time. And I've never seen a better recruiter. So she's got a lot of knowledge, and we want to share that, guys, with you. Share that with you on Tuesday the 23rd. Okay, guys, that's my time. Hope this was helpful. See you on chat. Have a great rest of your week. Take care.
Yeah.